Who is Lion L. Johnson? Lion L. Johnson, also known as the Lion and the First, is the Primarch of the Dark Angels. He was scattered along with the other Primarchs to the far corners of the galaxy. He finally came to rest on the world of Caliban, a beautiful but blighted world tainted by chaos due to its proximity to the Eye of Terror. Lion L. Johnson was renowned for a level of strategic brilliance and martial prowess that was rivaled perhaps only by Horus, but was distrusted by his brother Primarchs for his secretive and taciturn nature. The Chaos Emissary to Lorgar called him the Duelist. Johnson's capsule landed in the remote era of Caliban, far from any human habitation. There are no records of how he survived or what he encountered in the jungle during his early years, and any normal man would have died within minutes of being exposed to the planet. Yet, live he did for a decade in the jungle, alone and with no one to aid him. It would not be until the end of this decade that he would encounter his first humans. On that day, Johnson was found by a group of warrior knights of the Order during one of their quests across the planet. The young Primarch was already larger than a normal man, wounded by a bolt weapon fired from one of the knights and covered in the blood of one of the great beasts. While the knights prepared to kill Johnson, one of their number, a man named Luther, sensed something not immediately apparent about the seemingly wild man, and prevented his fellow knights from attacking. Despite the Primarch's near-feral state, Luther was able to slowly convince the savage man to come with him. Taking him out of the forest, Luther and the band then brought Johnson back to their fortress monastery, and there Luther named him Lion L. Johnson, which means the lion, the son of the forest, both in honor of the circumstances they found him in and in honor of his fierceness, which reminded Luther of the most feared of the great beast, the Calibanite lion. L. Johnson quickly grew up under the care of Luther and adapted the customs of the planet's inhabitants, learning to speak at an extremely rapid speed, though he never would speak of this his first 10 years of life. Luther and Johnson formed a strong friendship that complemented each other's abilities and skills. It was now that Johnson's primary skills were discovered. He was a brilliant strategist and unstoppable once he decided on a course of action. Together, the two warriors rose through the ranks of the Order and spread the name of the Order through the quests they undertook together. When the Order's ranks had swelled with new recruits, Johnson and Luther petitioned for a crusade against the terrible beasts which lived within the forest. Luther used his oratory skills to convince many of the Grand Masters of other monasteries to join the Order in this quest, and within a single decade the planet was free from the great beasts. The armies having been led by Johnson, in recognition of his achievements, Johnson was given the title Supreme Grand Master of the Order, which created jealousy within Luther. After defeating the beasts, L. Johnson demanded fealty from all the other knightly orders of Caliban. The only ones to oppose were the corrupted knights of Lupus, who were hunted down and destroyed. Eventually, a unit of the Emperor's forward scouts arrived at Caliban. Johnson was immediately given command of the First Legion when the Emperor realized he had found a lost son. Luther and the other members of the Order who passed the Astartes trials were formed into the First Legion soldiers, either as fully fledged Astartes, if they were young enough, or through genetic manipulation to increase their abilities if they were too old for the process. The new direction of Caliban did not sit well with many older knights of the Order, and they attempted to assassinate both Johnson and the Emperor, but were foiled by the psychic Zariel. With this power base secured and the new Astartes ready, Johnson publicly renamed the First Legion the Dark Angels after an old Caliban youth. Luther, too old to be a space marine, was the first to be genetically modified and became Johnson's second in command, as he had been during the Crusade. Johnson then left with the Emperor and the newly renamed Dark Angels. Befitting his status as the first Primarch, Lion L. Johnson received the first Gloriana class battleship, Invincible Reason. One of the first major commands L. Johnson oversaw were the vicious Rangdang genocides, where the Dark Angels took grievous losses and were for the first time eclipsed by the Ultramarines, Iron Hands, and Sons of Horus in the numbers and prominence. During the later stages of the war, a member of the 20th Legion, identifying itself as Alpharius, but admitting their Primarch had not yet been discovered, came before the Lion. This Alpharius offered to aid the Primarch against the Rangdan in hopes that the Dark Angels would maintain their prominence, and thus one day the Lion would be made War Master. L. Johnson at this time did not even know of the title War Master, but still secretly believed that such a title may one day be likely bestowed by one of the Primarchs by the Emperor. Alpharius stated that the 20th Legion preferred L. Johnson for War Master over someone like Guilliman, as he was not so different from them in their views of secrecy and war. It is not ultimately known if L. Johnson accepted Alpharius' help or not. L. Johnson gained notoriety for his leadership and combat capability on the Great Crusade, but was too secretive and stoic to be considered for the honor of War Master. Indeed, L. Johnson himself admitted he had difficulty understanding the emotions of others. Horus was instead appointed War Master by the Emperor, and the reaction among the other Primarchs was mixed. Some supported the appointment out of affection for Horus, and others opposed it. L. Johnson and Leman Russ were ironically alike in their attitude, cynically accepting the appointment as the final sign of Horus's status as their father's favorite son. During the campaign against the Sorash, Luther was able to foil a detonation of a nuclear weapon aboard L. Johnson's flagship. However, due to his own deep-buried jealousy, he had initially hesitated, something L. Johnson somehow discovered. As a result, the two had a falling out, and Luther, along with the force of mainly Caliban native legionnaires, were sent back to their home world. This was ostensibly to accelerate the recruitment of new legionnaires, but Luther felt they had been exiled, particularly after his scolding at the Zoramund campaign. 50 years later, and following great success in recruiting, training, and equipping new Dark Angels, Luther and his lieutenants were faced by a widespread rebellion in Caliban. Following the investigations on the part of the librarian Zahariel, it was revealed that Caliban was plagued by a resurgence of monsters, and that the insurgency raised against them included former knights of the Order who felt that L. Johnson had betrayed them. At the center of the entire affair as a mysterious cabal of Terran sorcerers, somehow linked to the emergence of warp monsters and twisted undead corpses. Having learned of Horus's rebellion against the Emperor, Luther declared the independence of Caliban and his opposition to Terra and L. Johnson alike. L. Johnson was campaigning in the Shield Worlds against the Gordian League when he received news of Horus's betrayal. L. Johnson knew that if Horus was to triumph in his rebellion, he would eventually have to confront the Emperor at Terra. For as long as the Emperor remained safe in the confines of the Imperial Palace, Horus could never truly triumph and become a new master of mankind. L. Johnson decided to act in order to prevent Horus from being able to successfully assault the Imperial Palace. He led a small force to the Forge World, Damiat, in order to secure several highly powerful siege weapons that Horus would need in order to assault Terra. Faced with superior odds, L. Johnson nonetheless succeeded in securing the siege weapons, and thus performed a master stroke. Rather than confronting Horus directly, he had seemingly defeated the War Master with only a handful of troops. Following his victory, L. Johnson met with Perturabo, who along with other legions was on his way to join Ferrus Manus in confronting Horus on Isstvan V. Johnson, seeing the opportunity to become the new War Master following Horus's seemingly inevitable defeat, traded the siege weapons to Perturabo in exchange for his support in his bid to become the new War Master. Tragically, Perturabo was in fact an ally of Horus, as revealed by his actions on Isstvan V. Immediately following the siege of Damiat, and Perturable acquiring the siege engines from Johnson, the Primarch of the Dark Angels returned to the Shield Worlds, where the majority of his legion were operating with the intention of heading to Terra immediately. As part of Horus's campaign to divert many of the remaining Loyalist legions from Terra, the Night Lords were dispatched to the eastern fringes, where in the Tharmas Crusade, they rampaged across many Loyalist worlds. During the genocide, Conrad Kurtz would invite the Leon to a meeting on the planet Zagolsa. There, the Night Haunter would reveal a prophecy to Lion concerning the future of the Dark Angels. Eventually, the talks would degrade to a fight, and El'Jonson would leave with a slashed throat and curse with a sword in his back. El'Jonson would then go on to obtain a warp engine of unforeseen power known as the T'Chula that would allow him to coordinate entire fleets in a warp jump. During their trip, the Dark Angel ships encountered demons, and El'Jonson reinstituted the Librarians to fight them in direct violation of the Council of Nicaea. This caused a dispute within the Legion that saw the El'Jonson eventually kill Nimiel. El'Jonson encounters Kairos Fatewaver at the height of the battle, who attempted to convert him to chaos, but can find nothing in his heart to sway it with, for he was absolutely loyal to the Emperor and viewed loyalty as its own reward. El'Jonson dismissed the Lord of Change by impaling him through the heart and equipping if the greater demons saw that coming. Using this engine, he would ambush the Night Lords and for a second time fight his brother Primarch. The Night Lords would leave severely injured, with Kurtz in a comatose state. El'Jonson would direct a second ambush on the regrouping Night Lords. There, Kurtz would reawaken and board the Invincible Reason with several of his troops. The battle would end with Kurtz fleeing to the lower decks and any surviving Light Lords, including the first captain, Sevatar, being taken prisoner. Kurtz, however, is loose in the bowels of the massive ship and wreaked terror throughout it, killing every search team El'Jonson had sent after him. After losing several squads, El'Jonson took up the hunt for Kurtz himself, stalking him throughout the Invincible Reason for the next 16 weeks. However, he can never find the elusive Primarch. Due to the ruin storm erected by the Word-Bearers, the Dark Angels found themselves unable to return to Terra as El'Jonson had intended. Eventually, they locked onto the light of the Pharos and made their way to Ultramar, linking up with the Ultramarines and Blood Angels, as well as their respective Primarchs, Guilliman and Sanguinius. The three Primarchs were instrumental in the formation of the Imperium Secundus, and El'Jonson was made Lord Protector of this new empire, a title similar to War Master. When Kurtz escaped the Invincible Reason and rampaged across Makarich, El'Jonson aided Guilliman in the unsuccessful attempt to defeat the renegade Primarch. However, the entire battle had been a trap, and Kurtz brought down the chapel they were battling in. El'Jonson and Guilliman both survived only thanks to Barabbas Dantiuk, who activated the Pharos and teleported them to Solva. El'Jonson, feeling responsible for Kurtz's rampages across Ultramar, obsessively hunted for his dark brother. In the Zempath system, El'Jonson demanded the Dreadwing to wreak havoc against Word-Bearers and World Eaters in the search for Kurtz. El'Jonson and Guilliman continued to clash over the policy with Imperium Secundus, particularly over how to deal with the rebels at Makarich that the Dark Angels Primarch was certain Kurtz had a hand in. After a suicide bomber hit an Astartes convoy, El'Jonson used his legion to establish martial law on Makarich. El'Jonson became certain that Kurtz was hiding in the rebellious Illyrian region of Ultramar's capital and advocated using weapons of mass destruction to destroy it from orbit. After facing resistance from both Sanguinius and Guilliman over the idea, El'Jonson instead deployed the Dreadwing to flush Kurtz and the rebels out. During the attack of Ulma Months, El'Jonson was finally able to corner Kurtz, and the two once again came to blows. After a vicious battle, El'Jonson was eventually victorious. He questioned why Kurtz turned, to which Kurtz answered why not, and to say that there was a monster in his head he could not stop. Instead of killing Kurtz, L. Johnson pulled back, saying he could not kill him, but then pummeled him again. He then ripped off Kurtz's backpack, then brought him down upon his knees, breaking his spine and paralyzing him. Kurtz was instead brought before Sanguinius and Golemon to stand trial. Kurtz admitted to his action, but refused to accept guilt because he was made to act that way. Thus, they were not crimes. Kurtz then divided Golemon from L. Johnson, accusing L. Johnson of ordering secret orbital attacks and pitting them against each other. L. Johnson sought to kill Kurtz, but Sanguinius prevented him with words, and Golemon broke his sword. He responded with anger, but Sanguinius dismissed him, ending the triumvirate and banishing him from Imperium Secundus. The Dark Angels withdrew from the planet hours following the dismissal. Afterwards, L. Johnson continued to brood, questioning the exile of Luther and other decisions as he stood in the chamber of Tachula. Soon his council arrived, and he told them that they would return to Caliban. Before they left, L. Johnson had a thought and ordered Tachula to teleport him in Holguin to Sanguinius' chamber. Shortly before Sanguinius was able to execute Kurtz back in Mackridge, L. Johnson appeared, asking for the angel to stop. Troops came into the room, demanding that he surrender, but he responded that Kurtz was able to see the future, and he repeated that Kurtz's claim that his death would be at the hands of an assassin was sent by the Emperor. This, to L. Johnson, was proof that the Emperor is still alive. Sanguinius recognized that his own visions of death would also be true. Golemon demanded what would come of Kurtz. L. Johnson knelt before his brothers and promised that he would be Kurtz's gaoler. Kurtz remained captive aboard the Invincible Reason, and occasionally L. Johnson would visit to speak with him and attempt to gather information from his prophetic visions, though the Night Haunter rarely proved cooperative. Following the trial of Kurtz, Sanguinius, L. Johnson, and Golemon all agreed to try and breach the ruin storm to reach Terra and to aid the Emperor, who they now knew was still alive. In the ruin storm, the Loyalist fleet came across a variety of horrors and a ward of entity spreading destruction known as the Pilgrim. Not even the Tachula, a variety of horrors, Tachula could navigate the ruin storm, frustrating the Lion. During the Battle of Perun, L. Johnson commanded Dark Angel's personnel as Sanguinius received a vision, and he realized that he needed to go where this struggle had begun, Davin. Reluctantly, Golemon and L. Johnson agreed to trust in Sanguinius, but both had thought they would simply destroy the world upon arriving. While other Davin, Sanguinius shocked L. Johnson by boarding the Invincible Reason and taking the captive Kurtz with him. Sanguinius hoped to use Kurtz's prophetic abilities to determine what he was meant to do upon Davin. Sanguinius then commended a mass landing on the world, and the enraged L. Johnson nearly ordered that Davin be subjected to exterminatus, regardless of Sanguinius' presence on it. At the last minute, he relented, and immediately was horrified by what he had nearly done. He realized that some other power was attempting to force the Primarchs down the path to damnation, and followed Sanguinius down to Davin. At Davin, Sanguinius was trapped within a portal and did battle with the demon Madiel, while Golemon and L. Johnson desperately tried to reach him. A vicious battle erupted both on Davin and above it, in which Golemon's acting flagship, Samothrace, was destroyed in orbit by the demon ship Veritas Ferrum. During the battle at Davin's temple, Golemon and L. Johnson managed to finally fight as brothers, and together they brought down a massive soul grinder. Eventually, Sanguinius was able to escape, and the Space Marine forces evacuated to space. Davin was destroyed by cyclonic torpedoes, and with its anchor gone at the demonic fleet had vanished. In the place of where Davin once was, a breach in the ruin storm was visible. The path led to Terra, but upon further study it became apparent that somehow Horus had foreseen this route, and large blockade was erected to block them. Golemon and L. Johnson agreed to distract the blockade, while Sanguinius and the Blood Angels made directly for Terra, for that was their destiny. L. Johnson expressed his desire to further distract the enemy by attacking worlds Horus had captured along the way to Terra, an act of vengeance he would come to relish. At some point before or during the siege of Terra, the Astronomicon went dark for the Dark Angels' fleet. Fearing that Terra had fallen to Horus, L. Johnson became nihilistic and instead of moving towards Terra, pledged himself to burning as much of the traitor's territory as he could, using the rationalization of attacking the traitor homeworlds in hopes of drawing reinforcements away from Terra to his troops. L. Johnson oversaw the destruction of Chemos and Barabbas in a spiteful purge dubbed the Passage of the Angels. Without the Astronomicon, L. Johnson relied on the Tachula for guidance. He eventually made for Deliverance, homeworld of the Raven Guard, where Corax and Russ were currently mustering. L. Johnson is quick to question the Raven Lord's absence from major fronts of the war, but his ire is put to rest by Russ, who points at the survival of his own legion as evidence of their worth. Russ declares he will join L. Johnson's crusade of vengeance, including warriors equipped with new Mark VI power armor produced on Kavihar. Corax, however, is cautious to commit to this bloody legion to what he sees as a needlessly spiteful waste, and only assigns a small expeditionary force of his Raven Guard to L. Johnson's forces. Eventually, L. Johnson made course for Terra, but arrived too late to influence the battle or prevent the Emperor from becoming interred in the Golden Throne. Johnson, racked with grief, returned to Caliban to reinforce his Dark Angels and recover in general. When the ships arrived in orbit, they were hit by a savage salvo of fire from the surface. The fleet pulled back, and Johnson tried to find out what was happening. He learned from a merchant ship that Luthor had poisoned the minds of the Space Marine garrison on the world and had taken control. It can only be seen by Johnson as a taint of chaos. Johnson's fury was let loose and the planet suffered. He ordered a systematic bombardment of the planet, destroying everything they could get rid of the world of chaos for all time. The planet burned and the defenses were whittled down to nothing. Johnson led his forces personally against the defenders who had taken refuge in the Order's fortress monastery. Johnson had found Luthor and saw him to be completely corrupted. Nothing of his old friend had survived. Luthor had been elevated to a strength equal to Johnson by the Chaos Gods, and the two met in a combat, the likes of which would not be seen again. They leveled the monastery around them, but the planet was also taking a heavy toll. The bombardment began to crack the surface of the planet, and the Dark Angels in orbit, unable to see the damage they were doing. The battle between Luthor and Johnson was titanic, but ended with a psychic attack that mortally wounded Johnson. Luthor then realized that what he had done, as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes. He fell to the floor, unwilling to fight anymore, but was too late for Johnson. The gods of chaos realized they had lost again, and sent a massive warp storm to rack the surface of the planet. It then broke apart under the strain, destroyed all but for the monastery of the Order, which had been protected by the vast force fields. When the Dark Angels descended to the now destroyed asteroid, they searched the ruins and found Luthor mumbling that Johnson had been taken by the Rat Watchers, and the Dark and the Wood would turn one day and forgive him for his sins. The Dark Angels could not find any trace of their Primarch. The rest of the Dark Angels had been converted by Luthor, were sucked into the warp and scattered around the galaxy, now named the Fallen. The final secret, known only to a very select few, is that buried even deeper within the rock than Luthor, Johnson lies sleeping, waiting with the Watchers in the dark for the time when he will be needed again, to lead the Dark Angels in a new and greater crusade. Save the Watchers in the dark, only the Emperor knows of this secret. As of M41, Johnson is the only loyalist Primarch, other than Goleman, definitely known to be alive.